In this video, I'm going to be breaking down my $100,000 farm business plan, a business plan I created for myself 5 years ago. But this time, instead of from the perspective of planning, I am going to be sharing from the perspective of hindsight, having hit and maintained cash flow for 3 years in a row. Now, for those that will invariably ask, I'm operating at a net revenue of 30%, which means that $100,000 six-figure revenue boils down to roughly $30,000. I'm going to break this video into 3 parts. Number 1, I'm going to walk through the original 7 components of my business plan and how they played out and evolved in real time. Number 2, I'm going to talk about how I stacked additional income streams into this agricultural effort to increase net revenue beyond $30,000. And then at the very end, I'm going to be answering the question I get a lot, which is, would your farm business survive without YouTube? In fact, I'm going to share exactly how much YouTube paid me over the past year with over 150,000 subscribers. And to be honest, that might be the most surprising part of the whole video. Now, if you click on the first link in the description of this video, I will email you not only my $100,000 farm business plan template, but that original video that I created 5 years ago. And to be honest, that might actually be a better perspective if you're just going into business, because I break down some of these principles in a little bit more detail. But my farm business plan focused on answering 7 questions, the first of which is why. Why, meaning that you tie your motives for doing business to something beyond money. And the question is, why did I want to become a farmer? Now, this question was coming at me right and left as I proposed to go into an industry that was not only far less profitable than a lot of the other industries that I was at that point in time contributing my marketing skills to, but number 2, farming is the least profitable industry on basically the scale of all of them. If you doubt me, just click on the second link in the description of this video for profit margins by industry. But there were 2 main whys that really shoved me in the direction of farming. Number 1, stewardship. And quite simply, from a faith perspective, I felt compelled to follow through and make the most of 30 acres that I was living on. Number 2 was a statistic, and that was that the average age of an American farmer is 56 years old, which is dismal as consumers who rely on food for 3 meals a day. But for me, in my business brain, I was actually thinking through that demographic from the perspective of advantage. I realized that jumping into farming as a then 25-year-old meant that before I turned 40, most of my competition would actually be retiring. If I could establish myself in this particular trade and these particular skill sets at a young age, I'd not only have food security on a personal level, but I'd also have skill sets that primed me for a durable income stream long term. Now, the second question on my business plan was who will buy my farm goods? And this is market analysis. And it's as simple as identifying 3 to 4 markets or groups of people that will buy the product you want to sell. Then make sure you have easy access to those markets before you start to produce the product. Now, at this phase in the game, me personally, I constructed a list of about 10 different markets or people groups that I could sell my potential farm products to. The list included things like friends and family, 3 to 4 really quality farmers markets in the Dallas Metroplex area, which, as a side note, most successful direct-to-consumer market farmers will live within a 2-hour radius of a highly populated and somewhat affluent area. And finally, building my own platforms like a blog, a website, and social media using previous marketing skills and search engine optimization skills that I had acquired in retail marketing before, using those skills to ultimately build into my own email newsletter list and direct access to my customer. Now, the last one ended up taking off like a rocket over the course of the next couple of years. Not only did I build a huge email list through social media, but I employed a specific strategy that I used to use in retail apparel, and that was the waitlist live launch strategy. In short, I began marketing products before they were even ready to sell. And what this looked like in real time was that I set up an email waitlist for my sheep, and then across social media and even on this YouTube channel, I began showing pictures and videos of the process, how I was raising these sheep in a regenerative format, how they were responding to a grass-based system, and I was clear on those social media platforms about exactly what I had to sell, which was Dorper sheep raised on pasture. And I was also very clear as to where people could join a waitlist if they were interested in buying Dorper sheep raised on pasture. By the time I had my first lambs ready to sell, I had been marketing that product for 6 straight months. And I had several hundred people on an email newsletter waitlist for my lambs. And then using this strategy, I've consistently sold out of my lambs every year. Now, I still have all of those other potential markets on my list, but as of yet, they're just backups. I haven't needed to use them yet. Now, back to the third question of 7 on that original business plan, and that is, what are my resources? This is a resource evaluation, and it ties to the reality that the fastest track to profitability is converting an existing resource into a desirable, marketable, finished product. For me, in the context of pasture-raised meat, I took 30 acres of underutilized grass and converted it into grass-fed sheep. Now, this initial resource evaluation process looked like obviously evaluating and taking inventory of my land base. But not only the natural resources, but the human resources, meaning who's going to help me with whatever I choose to farm on the days when I actually need help. As a side note, the human resource thing is often overlooked, but it plays a really big part in farming. For my example, I have guys that can help me maybe 2 or 3 days out of the month, which is so helpful for things like hauling and heavy lifting. But my day-to-day help is 2 teenage girls who, when I started, were actually not even teenagers yet. They were really quite small. So sheep ended up being a way better fit than my original plan of beef cattle for the day-to-day human resource that I had to do various tasks. But when you're filling out this business plan for yourself, the biggest thing to understand is that in order to minimize startup cost and minimize ongoing inputs, it's important to take really close inventory of your existing resources and make sure that whatever you choose to do matches them closely. It's also very important that you do not cling to your ideals at the expense of profitability. Which brings me to the 4th question in my business plan, which is, what are you going to farm? Now notice that this is very deliberately not the first question, even though this is often the very first consideration that we have as farmers or as people really excited to make a business out of something. And as a side note, you do have to have a general idea of the category that you want to enter into or the type of product that you want to go into as you make a business plan. But it's important to hold it really loosely. For example, I generally knew I wanted to raise grass-fed protein. But in 2020, I wanted to be a cowgirl so bad. In fact, I was actually making plans to and prepping to spend about $20,000 on a herd of Aberdeen Angus heifers. I was watching auctions and making calls and trying to get this herd onto my property, but everything just kept falling through, and I kept hitting roadblock after roadblock, and I'm so grateful because looking back, I really believe it was the Lord putting those roadblocks in front of me. Because once I took time to slow down and pull off of that initial excitement of becoming a farmer and using this 30 acres, I realized that sheep presented a better opportunity for my specific resources and my specific context, and would actually enable me to get into farming at a much lower startup cost. Now, question 5 of 7 is the fun part for me because it's how many units of one product do you need to sell in order to reach gross revenue goals? So now that all the heavy mental lifting is done in terms of market analysis and making an educated choice on the product you're going to market, you can begin to talk about money and flesh out revenue goals. Now, from the beginning, it was my intention to diversify to reach $100,000 on farm, but I wanted to make sure that if I had to make it with any one particular enterprise, the numbers did not look unrealistic. So I penciled out the numbers with sheep and found that I would need to sell 230 lambs per year in order to earn gross revenues of $100,000. Now, this felt totally achievable based on all of the information I had gathered and all of the people I had talked to this point. Now, I realize that I just said felt, and I do not like to rely on feelings when it comes to pretty much anything in life, especially business, but there really is something to be said for intuition. Going with your gut and paying attention if something really feels like it's not going to work. And ultimately, when I start to get these feelings, I do try to step back and pray about it and ask the Lord to give me wisdom in specific directions. When I was contemplating pulling that $20,000 trigger for that beef herd, my gut was absolutely gnawing at me, and I could not make that decision with any amount of confidence. But when I wrote the $11,000 check for not only a flock of sheep, but also the fencing necessary to contain them, there was total confidence and total peace in the decision. It's not sciencey, you can't put numbers to it, but sometimes you do have to go with your gut. Question number 6 that you need to answer as you're writing out a total business plan is, how long are you going to invest in allowing this business to come to full scale? And for me, I said I wanted to give my business 7 years before throwing in the towel and telling all my friends that they were right. I stunk at farming and didn't really work. Now, it's been said that the average person overestimates what they can do in 1 year, but vastly underestimates what they can do in 5 years. This long-term commitment before expectation of results is absolutely antithetical to the way at least the younger generation has and is being raised right now. We're taught instant gratification and trophies for participation and all of those things, but it is so important, as I've found, to learn to make long-term commitments, not expecting overnight success, and not quitting when you don't reach it. And I often think about this analogy of a mushroom versus an oak tree when we're trying to grow anything or develop anything. When you think of a mushroom, it blooms and blossoms overnight. Sometimes mushrooms are huge, and sometimes they're actually really pretty, but they wither and they fall away just as soon and as quickly as they came. And then you have an oak tree, which takes on average 20 years to reach maturity. But that oak tree has an average lifespan of 600 100 years. So I always keep these two things in mind whenever something's not growing as fast as I want it to, and I encourage myself that that's not necessarily a bad sign. In fact, growing too fast often is. So the seventh and final question on the business plan is quite simply, where are you going to get the money? It's a practical one, but if you are going to commit time to something, you have to be willing and able to work really hard to put money towards your idea without much of a return up front at least. Now, if you've done a good job of starting small, starting lean, like I really encourage people to in entrepreneurship and startups, expenses should be really manageable alongside of a regular job. And for me, I had exactly that. I had a regular job that was paying the bills, and I used my savings for the startup costs on my farming venture. Now, a major blessing and something that I really give the Lord credit for is that in year 3, I did diversify and I was able to start to cash flow the business by itself. Now, remember here, guys, cash flow is not profitability. I said that I hit cash flow in year number 3, but remember that up to year number 3, I had to double time it with my regular job and subsidizing growth there too. But cash flow is so important. It is a milestone to celebrate. I've been able to maintain and even grow cash flow since that point. For 4 years, I've been able to sell my sheep at exactly what I need to, and my wait list and demand for the sheep continues to grow. And because I'm using email newsletter marketing, I have a really close relationship with my customer base. I have some of the best customers, to be honest, in the world. And if they're not able to buy my sheep, or in addition to buying my sheep, they support me through buying a variety of value-added products throughout the year. Now this brings me to the second topic, which is additional income streams on my farm. I've baked in about 10 different income streams into my farm using my previous experience in marketing. Now to give some backstory on my thought process and why I baked an additional 10 income streams into my farm, I need to go back to the beginning. When I went into farming, it was my goal to make about $30,000 worth of net profit. At this, I knew that I probably would need to keep to some extent my original job in retail and marketing to subsidize and bring my income levels up to above poverty line. I know that $30,000 is not poverty line if you're a single person with no dependents, but once you start stacking on some dependents, yeah. So I originally planned to kind of double time it, but the Lord really opened up doors and momentum for me to stack all I knew of marketing into farming and really create content and resources that enriched this regenerative agriculture sphere and helped beginners come into it with less failure and more success. And it's been one of the greatest gifts to me because instead of splitting my time between farming and retail apparel, I'm 100% in farming and agriculture, just in really unique ways that use previous life skills to build an industry that's really been torn down for probably the better part of 100 years. And yes, one of those income streams is YouTube ad revenue, which brings me to the third topic and a question I get a lot. And not necessarily a question, but more often an assumption. And that is that my business plan relies entirely on YouTube ad revenue to float. And the answer to that is no. In fact, over the past year, with 150,000+ subscribers and almost 4 million views, YouTube has paid me $12,000. Now, I'm thankful for that money, but in relation to the time it takes me to make these videos and resources for you guys,
it's like $1 an hour.
And if YouTube were to cut off that income stream tomorrow, I'd be absolutely fine because I have built more durable income streams than YouTube ad revenue. This really ties back to the fact that I never started making YouTube videos for YouTube ad revenue. I have always made YouTube videos with the specific goal of adding subscribers to my email newsletter, which is the real gold and the real source of income for my business. And once people are part of my newsletter community, I focus on treating them really well and really giving them the best of experience. They get all kinds of free resources. I send monthly behind the scenes updates on the growth of my sheep farm, and I host free monthly live streams with special guests at no charge to them. In fact, use the link in the pinned comment to become part of that free email newsletter community. And if you're curious about the video I made 5 years ago, you can watch it here. I might actually have to start a support group for people who are obsessed with accumulating income streams, which actually, that might actually be another income stream.